Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is March 31st, 2016. 2 days ago, the Upper House passed the budget for next year, and immediately the Prime Minister held a press conference. I'm joined today by political analyst Michael Cucek. Michael, welcome back.
Welcome. It's great to be here.
Tokyo is in bloom. It is Hanami season now, and the entire atmosphere in Japan is changing.
Yes, we are finishing up by the time this is on, we'll have finished the fiscal year, and we start off with a new political season and a new budget.
Right. Tomorrow's April 1st. The budget passed 2 days ago, and the Prime Minister pontificated about what he's going to be doing now with the budget behind us and moving into the spring.
Well, he wanted to point out that there were some nice goodies for people in the budget, that there were things that were positive developments, because let's be frank, he's not had a lot that's been positive to talk about in terms of finance and in terms of such things as the budget. We've had a lot of bad news. So he wanted to emphasize there is good news. Good news, yes, Japan has the world's largest debt as regards to government debt, main government debt, but our budget this year, we're not putting out as much in the way of bonds as we were. So we're clawing back toward something approaching balance. That wasn't the good news. They stuck in some stuff for the elderly, stuck in some stuff for working mothers, and he wanted to make sure that we all knew about this and that this was all a part of their larger plan having to do with the new three arrows of the 100 million citizens being dynamically engaged in society and the economy. And okay, great, that worked great, I think.
You have said a mouthful. I mean, he spoke for some 10 minutes, and you've encapsulated just part of that, but each parcel of that contains lots of background information. For example, childcare. It's actually, there's something of a panic going on now with the criticism of mothers who can't find childcare services.
Yeah, it's been a very, very quick turnaround on the part of the government, which was sarcastic and cynical toward what was an anonymous blog post posted on some blog somewhere that someone wrote. There's a mother who in her closing line said, "Die Japan, where women cannot get their children into childcare." And "Die Japan" is it's pretty dramatic language in Japanese. Perhaps in English it sounds kind of pathetic. But the first reaction of the government was, there is no problem. This is just somebody mouthing off, no big deal. But it snowballed really quickly.
In 2 weeks it became a huge issue.
And then immediately the government has responded. Now it's responded in a way that's rather slimy. They said, okay, we're going to deal with this. We're going to increase the number of spots. And you say, okay, how? Oh, well, what we're going to do is reduce the standards and lower the quality of the care by reducing the number of caregivers necessary to watch a certain number of kids. So that, in other words, the supervisory aspect will loosen up on that so that more kids can get in and be watched by fewer care workers.
Right.
You say, great.
He also said we're going to raise the level of pay so it attracts people from other walks of life. And you're thinking, well, that's not going to work because we have a population problem too.
Yeah, we already have a very, very tight labor market. It is true. The first thing that should happen is that caregivers, whether it's for child care or elder care, their salaries must be raised. They are rock bottom salaries. And there are hundreds of thousands of folks who do have the certification, who nevertheless do not take part either in elder care or child care because the salaries are just abysmally low.
Right.
That would help. And the government certainly can do things about that in terms, basically it's basically the biggest customer necessarily. Now, the whole childcare story is really hard to deal with because you feel sympathy for the families that cannot get childcare, but they're geographically quite limited. It's in Okinawa Prefecture, a little bit in Fukuoka Prefecture, definitely in Tokyo, Kanagawa, Chiba, but otherwise throughout the country there are actually open spaces. There are 24,000 children on the waiting list, on waiting lists all over the country. And yet all over the country, there are over 160,000 unclaimed spaces. So it's not just the government is insensitive and the government is stupid and Japan is sexist. There's a distribution problem, and that it's actually really complicated. And that should have been the government's reaction instead of disdain.
Yes. Well, you can tell that the Prime Minister is really challenged because not only did he allot a certain increase in the budget for elderly care and also for those people who are leaving their jobs so that they can take care of their elderly parents, but also childcare, artificial insemination, which received a big boost too. So you can see that there's a push here. We don't have enough people. Let's try and make more people. That's a 20-year gestation period, right? To get people that are born now into the workforce. And, immigration is not really a favorite topic. The economy here is kind of teetering.
Yeah, there's in terms of the budget, there are two issues here. The fraction of the budget, the national budget, that goes toward social welfare spending is increasing dramatically each year because of society's aging.
Right.
And that has two parts in and of itself. People are living longer and there are fewer people being born. So when you look at the pie chart, the section that's involving social welfare is just expanding and expanding spending, which means all other forms of discretionary spending are being compressed. Right. And even though this is the largest budget ever, nevertheless, the growth area was social spending. We saw a little bit of extra spending, maybe 1% in defense.
1.5 in defense, which is pretty large.
But it's still, when you consider the increases in defense that are occurring throughout the region, particularly China, at 10% per year, Japan's 1.5% increase is simply not commensurate with the security threats. Other aspects will have to be cut in order to accommodate this social spending. And right off the bat, 1/4 of the national budget is simply to finance and service the debt of the country. So if ever the inflation issue comes about and interest rates go up, that 1/4 will actually expand too. So a person looking at the Japanese budget seriously from outside immediately freaks out.
230% larger than GDP is the amount.
That's right. It's
Japan's national debt.
And the national debt, that's the gross debt, of course. It's not, if you zero out all the different things that parts of the government owe each other, you're still in Italy, Belgium kind of levels of national debt, which is not great. Now, we had coming to visit us Joseph Stiglitz and Paul Krugman to tell us that don't worry about it. You guys can handle it. Here's what you should do to keep the economy going. But in the Ministry of Finance, they're just looking at the budget, and they're the ones who compile it, and it gives them nightmares.
Yeah.
And there's good news, but if you ever look at the publications of the Finance Ministry, they're dire. Okay, so Mr. Abe put the best face on it he could in his press conference. Now, what was really interesting about the press conference were the questions after the presentation,
right?
Where he actually took on the two hot issues of the day.
Right. The two biggest issues were, one, having to deal with the economy and the tax structure. One, not having to do with the economy at all. It's a political issue.
That's right. The first is, will the government go forward in raising the consumption tax on April 1st, 2017, from 8% to 10%. A year from tomorrow.
A year from tomorrow, that tax is supposed to go in. He's actually promised that.
And at this press conference, he was asked specifically, okay, you've delayed it once before. Are you going to delay it again? And he set up a criteria. I am going to raise it unless there is a tsunami or Lehman shock type major disaster that gives me a reason to not do so. Now, that raises the bar a lot higher than we ever thought it was.
Right.
We thought it was the economy is weak, can't take it, we'll have to forego it. We thought that's what seemed the case in inviting Krugman and Stiglitz to Japan to lecture the Prime Minister. And Paul Krugman did us all a great favor by actually giving us the entire transcript of his meeting, so we know exactly the interplay between the two of them. It was mostly Krugman talking. But, it really changed the atmosphere. And the second thing that changed the atmosphere was the question of whether there's going to be a double election.
Read my lips. What did he say?
He said, I have not got this in my mind.
Not an iota.
Not a bit.
Right.
And, okay, that's not true. Fundamentally, it's not true.
Yes.
In that, of course he's thinking about it. He's been thinking about it since January because everybody talks about it. Unless he doesn't read any newspapers or watch any television, there's no way he could not have it in his mind.
Well, I mean, we talk about it endlessly because it's a huge deal. It is a big deal, and it impacts also the initiation of the consumption tax or the withholding of that decision.
Yeah, everybody thinks that there is a simple two-step process. Delay the consumption tax, call a House of Representatives election.
Right.
Because the House of Representative election is the way that the people can either affirm or contradict what the Prime Minister has done. Show their disapproval for what he has done.
In a very short period of time, Michael, we will know whether the Prime Minister was playing a trick on us or not. He's not going to wait 6 or 7 months before he does something and people are going to say, now wait a minute, didn't you on March 29th say, I mean, if he's going to make a decision, he's going to make that decision within 2 months.
That's right. He has to do it so that there's the necessary time to run a double election in July. There has to be about a month of preparation time. The actual number of days is actually somewhat less than that, but you don't want to cut it too fine.
Here on Tokyo on Fire, we are reading that. We are watching it. The next critical event, perhaps the Hokkaido 5?
Well, we're looking at the Hokkaido 5 because in the case of that particular by-election, what we have is what should be an easy setup for the LDP to hold on to a seat. It was held for a very long time by Machimura Nobutaka, a faction leader, in fact, the leader of the faction with which Mr. Abe belongs. Now, he passed away, and his son-in-law is running for that seat. In addition, in order to guarantee that there is going to be enough of an electorate arriving at the polls, Mr. Abe invited to the Kante one of the most scandal-ridden and notorious, if not the most notorious politician in Japanese politics, Suzuki Muneo.
Right.
And Suzuki promised that he would deliver the votes of his particular political party called Daichi, which is a Hokkaido regional party.
He's from Hokkaido. He is ingrained in Hokkaido. He was raised out of Hokkaido.
He is Hokkaido all the way to his bones.
Right.
And he's promised that his followers will vote for the LDP in that district election. If
they're calling in those chips.
If calling in those chips is still not enough, and somehow they lose that election, then everyone says there is not going to be a House of Reps dissolution anytime. There's not going to be a House of Reps election, because if the LDP can't win there, then it would be insane to try to put it to a national vote.
Right.
I'm looking also, as the other trigger point, the declaration by the GPIF.
Okay, so that's coming up in April?
That should be coming up in April. They should have a report on how they're doing. Now, it's going to be tricky for them. They have a mandate to have a certain percentage of their assets in the stock market.
Right.
Now, the stock markets have taken a tumble, but the GPIF and other funds like it, because they have this percentage that they're supposed to cover, they have been buying stocks big time, mostly from foreigners who are trying to get out of the Japanese market, and filling in the hole inside their accounts. But they're going to have to declare in April what they lost on a share basis.
And the prediction there is not looking very rosy,
It looks really bad. And if that's the case, and the media and the opposition can put a narrative together, hey, Shinzo, where's our money? That's going to be terribly effective, not only in the House of Councilors election, but it would be lethal in a House of Reps election.
Right.
And that would really changed the dynamic in terms of his thinking.
Okay. For people who are continuing to watch Tokyo on Fire, every week is a dynamic change. Every week something happens. So predictions that we make, we might change, in the next episode because
They're not predictions. We're looking at what's happening on the ground, and we're trying to report how people are thinking. As analysts, we could say what we feel, but that's not really worthwhile. What's really worthwhile in what we're doing is trying to say, okay, here in Tokyo, because we're in it,
right.
This is what the conversation is. Take it or leave it.
Well, it is an item of great interest to us. Is there going to be a double election or not? Because that impacts other things too. There are a couple of things that are on the schedule that potentially are bad news, but there are also some good things that are on the schedule. The G7 in Ise.
And they're going to put on a really big show for that, and there is supposed to be some kind of announcement regarding the tax, either positive or negative, from Mr. Abe.
Maybe a supplemental tax.
No, there's the consumption tax.
Okay, that decision.
Of course, no one has come on record and saying, yes, he's going to make a definite announcement before the summit, but everybody thinks that's what's going to happen. And since the theme of the summit is going to be global sacrifice on behalf of the global markets and the global situation, which is in a pretty precarious position again. We're falling toward yet again a recession globally, not on the scale of the Great Recession of 2008, but nevertheless the pullback has been really, really tough, and Japan's GDP has taken a big hit because of it. If he's going to go forward with it, it's going to have to be in some kind of context with other countries reining in some way their weaknesses or doing something for the international global environment that is quite dramatic.
Okay, but as a PR event for the nation of Japan, for the Abe administration, this is really something to help lift people's spirits about being Japanese and being in the Japanese economy.
Well, they're certainly doing that by putting it at the very heart of the Japanese spiritual world, which is Ise, and the shrines there which are the imperial family's shrines. They are really putting a lot of emphasis on it in a way that most, let's be frank, most industrial countries, when they host the G7, it's a pain. And thousands of journalists come from around the world and congregate for a few days, and they have nothing really to report. They're just there. It's just a big show. Here in Japan, however, for the Japanese government, it's a tremendously big deal because it's not just the G7 summit itself, it's all the other side meetings. For example, the meeting in Hiroshima that of foreign ministers. We're going to have Secretary of State Kerry. I've heard that the Foreign Minister of France and also the Foreign and Commonwealth Minister of England will all go to the cenotaph at Hiroshima, all with 3 nuclear powers together as a part of that set of meetings. So there are meetings that have taken place among various levels of the government all over Japan. All of this process is really important to the Japanese government. And whereas in most countries it's a pain, here it's seen as a privilege.
Right. Prime Minister will be the host. The host nation will be Japan. And soon after that, the time to call an election of the lower house, if it's going to happen, will be very, very soon. But in any event, the closing of the upper house in preparation for the elections on perhaps July 10th.
And as you said, Mr. Abe, whatever he does, can't say, oh, well, that was way in the past. When I said I wasn't going to raise the tax, that was way back when.
When I said I wasn't going to have a double election,
that was a long time ago.
Water under the bridge.
Things are different. If he tries that trick, he may have a very unpleasant reaction from the electorate.
Politics is not a non-contact sport. You need to stay tuned. We're watching this if you're not. Please stay tuned.